Hello, and welcome back to our journey through the Mother of Peace, Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon, recounting her life story, the story of the greatest woman peace leader in all of human history. I say so confidently. Actually, in this chapter, chapter 5, we're going to continue, and this is where True Mother's introducing the story, the account of establishing the newspapers. Of course, we've established newspapers in Korea and Japan and America and South America and at least that many places. A little bit about Japan, but especially about America, because, you look at what's going on today in the news. Our prayers go out to the people of Ukraine as Russia is now in its third day of invasion. And there's a lot that can be said about the relationships between these nations, between Russia and America, between NATO and Russia. We're kind of reminded now, if we watch the news, we're kind of reminded of the Cold War era as we see Vladimir Putin essentially trying to redraw the map as it once was under the Soviet Union. Whereas what Mother is saying, she's trying to bring the world together to say, we are one people under our heavenly parent. And so I've just come back from Korea, where I attended, along with many others, the World Summit and Think Tank 2022. Witnessing with my own eyes, True Mother bringing world leaders together, okay? Sitting, acting heads of state and former heads of state. And, there were so many more that wished to come from Europe, from Africa, from South America and Central America, so many more leaders that wished to come physically to Korea to further the mission of peace on the Korean Peninsula. But unfortunately, because of COVID-19, as you know, very few were able to make it. And those that did was a miracle. But as I sat there in the stadium, in the World Peace Center, as I watched, one leader after the other come to the stage and speak to the world. Yes, about the steps towards peace on the Korean Peninsula, but frankly, really as a symbol towards peace for the world, okay? And we are, Russia came up, China comes up, North and South Korea, America, Japan, all these major actors, and Europe also. In fact, this time Europe brought an incredible offering for the World Summit. And I'm going to share with you a few more words that Mother shared with us on February 16 at the end of this message. But first, I want to dive back into this story, because as we look now at what's going on in Europe, and as we're reminded of the Cold War era through events that are happening today, this is the environment in which these newspapers were actually founded, and for the very purpose of bringing a true headwing thought, or in many cases to counterbalance the liberal view, a conservative view, one that stands up for moral, family, ethics, traditional values. And it has to be said, you have to understand that, when these great nations, Russia, China, and these nations look at the so-called free democracies of Western civilization, they're not always impressed, okay, with some of the things that we do under the flag of freedom. Because under the flag of freedom, we make many, many mistakes. Because freedom, as you know, without responsibility can bring great danger. So not only our economic stance or our military stance or our political stance, but really our moral and ethical stance is important to win the respect even of our enemies. So with that, I dive right in here back to chapter 5, and Mother states, the year 1975 was a time when the shadow of gloom hung over the world. The US pulled out of Vietnam that April, leaving the country in the hands of the communists. People were shocked and horrified as the communists in Vietnam and its neighbor, Cambodia, slaughtered entire populations. Across the globe, communism was gaining strength. Now, you got to remember, this is a time still when many people did not fully understand the threat of communism, or even if they understood it was not such a good thing, it was something happening to a people far away, right? Well, not the case. I was born in North Korea, and I experienced firsthand the cruelty of communism and the wretchedness of war. So I knew very well that when Vietnam fell, it would lead to bloody massacres and the spread of its harsh ideology to neighboring countries. So True Parents also saw the potential in Japan, a great potential. There was already a clear threat and a fight between sort of pro-right and pro-left ideologies. And that's when they set about to open a newspaper, right? Mother says, "My husband and I decided that the most effective way to influence Japan as a free society and protect it from communism would be to create a newspaper. In democratic countries, the media is often more critical than constructive." So what does this mean? More critical than constructive. So in a free society where the media is rightly free to express a counter view to whatever the government of the time might be saying, that's really safe to keep the government in check. That's right. But these so-called free society, think tanks and media outlets can also be usurped by ideologies that seek to destroy that very freedom that they speak on. Trying to gain market share, editors pander to forces that persecute those who aren't politically correct or who practice a minority religion. So the media outlets can be bought. How? Whatever gets them ratings, because that's what gets them their money. So although the media is there, a free press is there to really protect the people from corruption, from strong-armed authoritarian regimes that might take over the government. Well, the media also can be a power that can be bought or influenced by negative powers. My husband and I imagined a different kind of media, one that is constructive and represents fairness and absolute values. And with this in mind, in January 1975, we founded the Sekai Nippo newspaper in Tokyo. So this wasn't easy. They came under big opposition. And of course, as in Korea and Japan and eventually America, the naysayers thought that father and mother were simply trying to create a propaganda machine for the church, when in fact, that was not the case. Simply acting as a church was not enough to do the work that we are here to do, that True Parents are here to do, okay? So they wanted to have a voice that upheld traditional values and family and moral values for these nations, because they saw that the liberal media, leaning left media, was ready to do away and undermine those values. But it's not a profitable business. I mean, the newspaper print business today isn't profitable for many people. But now these outlets that True Parents founded, both now in print and online, still serve, even though not profitable in the sense of financial gain, but they are serving the purpose to be a voice. Father and mother were opposed by left-leaning groups from all angles. And what they did in Japan, they also set out to do in America. Listen how mother shares. In early 1981, when my husband and I heard that the Washington Star, the conservative voice in Washington, D.C., was closing down, we were concerned. There were two well-established newspapers in that city, the Washington Star and the Washington Post. The Washington Star, which had been in operation for over 130 years, had run into financial difficulties. Soon there would only be one newspaper in the most politically powerful city of the United States. And that newspaper, the Washington Post, was left-leaning in its editorial stance. So True Parents knew that there was a need for a newspaper, especially in Washington, D.C., not only the political capital of America, but arguably the political capital of the world. there would need to be a voice that protected faith and freedom and family values. And at the time, there was no other organization willing to step in and save the star. So True Parents took it on. And Mother says, on May 17, 1982, think of it, we're just coming up to our 40th anniversary of the Washington Times soon. May 17, 1982, after a great deal of effort to find and build a printing press and hire competent, dedicated staff, the first issue of the Washington Times was published. Of course, again, they came under persecution, being accused of using it as a propaganda arm. But in fact, this was a newspaper that championed faith and family in a city where that really, really matters. And the point is that when we look today at what Mother's able to accomplish, bringing world leaders together, especially these from America, it is not just the values of the Universal Peace Federation that give them the comfort zone or give them the platform upon which they're free to travel from the United States and participate in this dialogue with an NGO. Really, it is strengthened by the Washington Times. I mean, I think many members around the world perhaps don't know how important the Washington Times Foundation and the newspaper is in terms of giving an environment and platform upon which amazingly powerful leaders can come to the table, meet with us, and discuss providential topics. This is really the incredible work of True Parents that was seeded now 40 years ago and more. So it's appropriate that we are reading through these passages of Mother's journey at this time, the work that True Parents were doing decades ago. And you see these fruits. These were seeds planted years ago, and the fruits that Mother is harvesting today, surely it must be recognized the foundations that have played and still play a major, major role. And so now, as we see this conflict in Europe, Mother's trying to remind us that we're one family under our Heavenly Parent. And on February 16, after the World Summit was concluded, after the victory celebration was concluded, Mother invited a handful of leaders up to the Chunjungung. And on February 16, in the early morning, we shared coffee together and some snacks together. And Mother heard some reports from a few key leaders that were responsible to really bring about the victories of the World Summit and Think Tank 2022. And we heard a few songs. And then Mother shared her words. And of course, this was not televised. This was not officially published or recorded. So I have a few unofficial notes of an unofficial translation. But I wanted to share some of these words because I think it connects not only to, what Mother was sharing here in chapter 5, but also what's going on in Europe right now and what is in her heart. The embrace of True Parents' love goes way beyond these sort of political skirmishes or these very one-sided political ideologies. However, each of these nations has a major role to play. And you will hear from some of the words I'm going to share right now that the way Mother was so moved by Europe's contribution to the World Summit, she truly feels that Europe has a real fighting chance of coming back into the forefront of providential leadership. But what's the key ingredient for that? It's Heavenly Parent. It's God. It's recognizing that, God exists as our Heavenly Parent. Why? When you look at Europe, in fact, Europe is several years ahead of America in terms of forgetting God. So the freedom-loving democracy environment of America is fantastic. But when we advance freedom without responsibility, when we argue beliefs held by minority groups that go against God's will, but they somehow usurp the power elite, somehow they usurp the political elite, they somehow tend to control the voice of the media. When they enter into the establishment of education, then this mighty nation, this mighty Western civilization this free civilization, not only promotes good things like freedom and human rights, but it ends up going too far and adopting thought that starts to deteriorate our relationship with God. It deteriorates our protection of traditional, moral, and ethical family values, universal values. And like Khadebe of Africa put it, he said, ancient wisdoms that shouldn't need to be argued on 24-hour cable media. They shouldn't be argued by the pundits and by political elite. The ancient wisdoms that used to be called common sense, right? Used to be called common sense. But Mother has declared, part of the problem is that although the providence has followed the growth of Christianity, Christian leaders and Christian nations have made so many mistakes, and those mistakes have come back to bite us. So Mother sees all of this clearly, and she sees a pathway with unity by working together, how we can truly become one family under God and overcome any kind of challenge. But I want to share with you as much as possible so that you can feel just from a few days ago, Mother's heart as it pertains to the world and especially Europe, Africa, Russia, China, and so on. So Mother said, because the foundation of Christianity was built over 2,000 years to support the advent of true parents, had Christianity supported true parents, everything would have been easier. Okay, so let me just put a point on this. Mother's saying, in reality here, if Christianity understood its role to support the advent of true parents, well, the Cold War wouldn't have happened. Korean War wouldn't have happened. All of these things that we're reading about, the foundation, the Washington Times, Universal Peace Federation, all these things wouldn't have happened in this way. We wouldn't have needed these things. We wouldn't have been having these debates. And certainly Russia would not be invading Ukraine today, right? Despite the fact that certainly there were large territories that were anti-Christian at the time, the Christian foundation would have been such guided by True Parents' advent, would have been able to lovingly embrace the entire world and the entire religious world, political world as well. But it didn't happen, right? So Mother goes back to 2,000 years ago also. She says, following Jesus' crucifixion, Christianity began humbly under tremendous persecution. It expanded throughout Europe, from Italy, throughout Europe and the British Isles, and around the world. In the last days, Africa suffered the most, and missionaries went all the way to Africa. So Mother has mentioned this before, right? Although Christianity was blessed and the Christian, the providential course of Christianity blessed, Europe, Western Europe. But Mother has mentioned before how several Christians, leading Christians, failed to truly understand the essence of Jesus. And we used this power and blessing that we had to colonize, to enter Africa, among other places. And in the grand analysis, the final equation, you can see we went to take more than we went to give. And this is what Mother means when she says we missed the essence of Jesus. So not only was Christianity supposed to be preparing for a time when the second advent, the advent of true parents, but it was supposed to be spreading the love and essence of Jesus. And the truth is that in many, many, many circumstances, the Western powers, the Christian powers failed to do so. And Africa suffered greatly. Mother says, Europe was ahead of Africa and Africa was behind. But in terms of the providence, Africa ended up standing in the elder brother position. And this time also for the World Summit, so many African nations, heads of state, wanted to come, but were unable to, and many of them blocked from being able to come. So Mother was sorry about that, and she mentions this. She says, I praised Africa, and I'm sorry they couldn't come. And then she spoke to Taj Hamad, who was working with Tom Walsh to deepen relationships with the Pope, okay? Mother spoke directly to Taj in this meeting. She said, look, you've been working to reach out to the Pope, but from now on, you need to speak more boldly with more confidence, right? Jesus Christ was crucified and said he would come again for the marriage supper of the Lamb. You need to tell the Pope this, she said. Tell the Pope this. When do you think Jesus will come again? And where do you think he is coming to? And under what circumstances will he come? And who will be this bride of this marriage supper that we speak? Who will be the bride? And until when will the Catholic Church continue waiting for the second advent of the Lord? All of the events happening around the world show you now that if Jesus Christ was born in this era, surely he would come to bring love and bring solutions to the world problems. So, Taj, please confidently tell the Pope. So, she's giving Taj some homework here. Good luck, Taj. So you got to go and have this conversation with the Pope to really emphasize clarity around this point. How long will the Catholic Church, how long is Christianity going to wait for the second advent? Did we forget that we're waiting for the second advent? And if the second advent did come, where would he come? And under what circumstances? And good question, what would he do against the backdrop of all this fighting and all this pandemonium that's going on? And perhaps most importantly, what does the marriage supper mean? If there's a marriage, and if Jesus is the bridegroom, who's the bride? Who's the bride? Let us continue again with my notes from this special meeting with True Mother. I hope that Europe can regain its position as the center of the providence, just as it was during the height of Christianity. Wow. The time has come to become completed. The European continent is awakening and can awake to even greater heights. So I say now to all European leaders, please encourage everyone that the solution is for the world to unite as one. So Mother's talking about Russia and China. Mother's talking about certain nations that do not support religious freedom as much as others do. And she's explaining that certainly those that don't support religious freedom, they don't have a place in the future of the world. But she sees a place for all nations. She sees a place for all of these actors coming together. And again, she has mentioned about how Europe should unite and America should unite as one, and then centering on Europe, to support Russia and China to come to the table, come to the next World Summit, come to the family. So when you think of all this, when you look at what Mother's saying here against the backdrop of what was Mother saying, 7, 8 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, when she sent Dr. Balcom to Europe, she mentioned, Dr. Balcom, you need to go to Europe because Europe is sleeping. And then he reported after a few days and said, Mother, don't worry. Europe wasn't sleeping. It was dreaming. And truly, I've spoken with Dr. Balcom. The truth is that in large part, Europe just needed to kind of upgrade its reporting and communication about many of the great things that were going on. But the deeper storyline here, because the deeper storyline here is to do with Heavenly Parent. Because when Mother, after Father passed and Mother went back to Europe, she spent time in Switzerland, she toured different parts of Europe. She came to America and she said how sad she felt looking at the beautiful cathedrals, the Christian cathedrals of Europe, and how she felt Christianity in Europe, Catholicism, and these cathedrals kind of represent the shell, the shape of what Christianity used to be, but inside the egg, inside there's no yolk anymore. There's an empty yolk when it comes to the content and the heart of Christianity, because it's been missing its fundamental role and purpose. Certainly, if it failed to understand the advent of true parents and failed primarily to understand the preparation for God's only begotten daughter, then it's really been building a house of cards ever since then, in a sense. But it still has incredible influence and foundation. And Mother is continually seeking to work with Christianity as a leading world voice. So again, when you see Mother directing her attention to Europe and saying, unite with America, because America is still several years behind Europe in the sense of forgetting God. There's too many Americans still that fight for God, that fight for these traditional values. There's also too many Americans that are deteriorating that, moral fabric. So it's been the work of the Washington Times, on the one hand, Universal Peace Federation, Family Federation, Women's Federation, many other organizations that True Parents founded to keep the light alive. And it's not about right wing or left wing. It's not about democracy versus communism. It's really ultimately about coming back together as one family under Heavenly Parent. Mother wants to speak boldly this year, brothers and sisters, boldly to the Pope, boldly to Russia, to China, to Europe, to America, and so on. So Mother wants Europe to reawaken to greater heights by remembering Heavenly Parent, and then to unite as one and to help Russia and China also, who she sees connected to Europe. Just a few more words I want to share. From small nations to all the superpowers of Europe and all the nations of the world, France, the UK, all of those who fought together for a long time and sometimes fought against each other for a long time. But now the time has come for these nations to work together and also to recognize the advent of true parents. Boldly, brothers and sisters. I am curious, which nations will first accept true parents? The nation that first accepts true parents will be the elder brother, and this great blessing and a tremendous opportunity for that nation. Therefore, let us not lose this opportunity. I hope that the leaders are definitely able to accomplish this task and go forward. And with regard to the Vatican also needs to reform itself, rebuild itself. And once the Chonilguk Sanctum will be erected next year at the Chomonggung, it will be the center of the universe. Once it is erected next year, it will be the center of the universe, which is why I want you to prepare to go there with your family, with your tribe. It will be the center of the universe. It will be the abode of Heavenly Parent. And since all religions have come to their final point, they need to let go of everything and find their ultimate purpose and emerge, which is to unite with Heavenly Parent and receive the blessing and return to Heavenly Parent's bosom and live in harmony with Heavenly Parent. You need to share this message boldly with everyone so you can speak strongly about this truth right now. So, Mother's beckoning all of us, okay? Which nation will be the first to truly accept true parents? It could be a nation that today you think is an enemy nation. It could be a nation today that you think is a heavenly nation or a good nation. Mother said other things in this meeting. The truth is that the sky is the limit. When we put Heavenly Parent at the center, when we stand up for what is eternally true and right, and unite together as one, centering on our true parents and Heavenly Parent, look, all these problems we can solve. And so the story of the Mother of Peace, this you have to understand. This is the central scripture of the day. And I wish I had more copies to share with all the leaders that I met in Korea when I was there at the World Summit. But I'll tell you a short story just to emphasize how important this story is. When I was spending time with the Sri Lankan delegation, I was called upon to, they needed some extra help. So I helped with the former president of Sri Lanka and his delegation. When I was spending time with them, I shared a story of Mother's life straight from the book. I didn't hold the book. I shared it from memory, true Mother's journey at 5 years old, crossing the 38th parallel, escaping the terror of the communist North regime from the north, escaping the border to the south, where she hoped and her mother and grandmother hoped to be able to find safety, not knowing that they would never be able to return to the north. but they knew that if they stayed in the north, certainly they wouldn't be able to survive a year or two. I shared that story in great detail, how they were caught, how mother was bringing food to the guard, how finally they were set free, and then found somebody who actually a second time tried to get them across, and they successfully crossed, but it was because of mother singing. I can imagine if I was there, I would have said, be quiet, but somehow mother was singing songs of the South, and it was those melodies that were heard by the South Korean soldier who was ordered to shoot on sight anybody trying to cross. It was those melodies of mother's young 5-year-old voice that stopped the only begotten daughter from being shot in her tracks before we even got a chance to meet her. So when I shared this story with the Sri Lankan team, they realized, wow, this is not just some NGO, This isn't just some, peace gathering of leaders. This is deeply rooted in a personal, lifelong dedication of Father and Mother Moon to bring about not only peace on the Korean Peninsula, but peace in the world. And it was because of the great work of our leaders and members throughout all of Asia Pacific One that we now have 16 languages, look behind me, 16 languages translated of True Mother's life story, including Sinhalese. Now, why is this significant? Look at this beautiful, beautiful language. Look at this. This is the first ever time True Parents words printed in Sinhalese for the nation of Sri Lanka. And yes, it's true that a large percentage of the Sri Lankan people speak English, but there's also a percentage who don't speak English. And guess who else doesn't speak English? The former president of Sri Lanka, who I was taking care of. So I was able to give him the first ever printed copy of True Mother's life story in his language, in a language that he can read and understand. And in response to the short story of Mother crossing the 38th parallel, their response was, wow, these are real people. It took it away immediately in just a few minutes. Their relationship with Mother went from being part of some VIP delegation that was invited by Hun Sen and Ban Ki-moon to some international convention of, important people talking about peace on the Korean Peninsula, being driven around in limousines and, staff on your left and right, staying in 5-6-star hotels. In the moment that I simply shared with confidence the amazing story of this human being, their relationship went from what it was to being one of, wow, not only are they doing amazing work, but these people are real. These are real people. Father and Mother Moon, real people doing real work. And from the earliest pages of their life, confessing their faith in Heavenly Parent and confessing their determination to bring about a heavenly unified world within their lifetime. So, brothers and sisters, thank God for True Parents. Thank God, even though Christianity couldn't help 60 years ago, hopefully they can help now. And in the meantime, thank God that we could establish so many foundations, the dedication of all the members to support those foundations, including the Washington Times. Wow. Without which, I'm sure that the things that we've been able to see True Mother achieve over the last 8 years would not have been possible. So God bless you. I hope you enjoy this message. I hope you enjoy coming back to our journey with the Mother of Peace, and a few little golden nuggets straight from the mouth of our mother just a few days ago. And let us keep Ukraine in our prayers. And who knows what's going to happen? I'm sure you're keeping abreast of the news, but you can just pray on what would Mother be thinking? What would Mother be praying for? I hope that through today's message and through the words I've shared, you can imagine. Mother said it. She wants us to come together as one. Yes, we need to be strong. Yes, we need to be bold. Yes, we need military to protect ourselves. We need to stand up against bullies. But there needs to be a vision beyond just black and white, beyond just right and wrong. right? Left and right. And true parents have always had their mind on that vision. That's the vision where you and I, brothers and sisters, where Russia and America, brothers and sisters, where all of the nations of the world can come together as one to build a heavenly, unified world. Brothers and sisters, God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Until next time, I hope you enjoyed this message.